"You don't need a room, you need a nursing home," my son said, wiping his mouth like he hadn't just gutted me in front of his children. He said it over mashed potatoes and roast chicken, like he was reading from a script he'd practiced for weeks. His wife, Kayla, didn't flinch. She just reached for the salad bowl and nodded like it was overdue. The twins kept eating, eyes lowered, the way kids do when they feel the adults stop pretending. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask him to repeat it or explain what he meant. I didn't look at Kayla or the boys. I picked up my fork, scooped up a bit of carrot, and chewed it slowly. Because that's what you do when someone sets fire to your dignity in the middle of dinner. You keep chewing, like nothing's burning. I had once rocked that boy to sleep through fevers and heartbreaks. I had stitched his soccer uniform 3 times during one awful season when we couldn't afford a new one. I had skipped meals so he could have seconds. Now I was apparently too much. Too old. Too slow. Too in the way. He didn't say it cruelly. That's the worst part. He said it like he believed it was reasonable. Like a suggestion. As if home had quietly expired for me. I cleared the plates after dinner, the way I always did, scraped chicken bones into the bin, wiped the table, loaded the dishwasher. My hands moved on their own. Ritual over resentment. I didn't cry. Not then. Grief has better timing than that. Later that night, in the little guest room I'd been pushed into after the nursery was remodeled, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the lamp. The same lamp I brought from my old house. The one my husband used to read beside every night before sleep took him, gentle as a sigh. Now it lit up a corner no one noticed, in a room that smelled faintly of mildew and dismissal. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat still and remembered. Not angrily, not dramatically, just thoroughly. I remembered the house I left behind when I moved in with Todd and Kayla, the one my husband and I bought after 10 years of saving and 20 of dreaming. It had peeling wallpaper and stubborn faucets, but it also had a porch where we drank morning coffee and a maple tree that turned gold in October so bright it made your chest ache. I had left it because Todd said, "You'll be safer with us." I had believed him. But safety, I've learned, has nothing to do with locks on the door. It has everything to do with whether someone sees you as a person or a placeholder. That night, I realized my name had quietly been erased from the door. I wasn't Mom anymore. I was an obligation, a spare plate, a thing that took up air, and still, I didn't say a word. I brewed my tea the next morning, just like always, poured it into the chipped mug Kayla didn't like, sat at the table long after they left for work and school. I didn't pack. I didn't plan. But something had moved inside me, quietly, deliberately, like a door that hadn't closed all the way, just clicked shut. He said I needed a nursing home. I made a different decision. They didn't throw me out, not exactly. They just made it clear I wasn't staying. It started small, the way most erasures do. One drawer cleared for baby clothes. One shelf, temporarily, taken for Kayla's decor. The guest room closet became shared storage, which meant my winter coat lived in the garage. My yarn basket disappeared one day. No one mentioned it. Then came the rules. No boiling cabbage. It lingers. Maybe use headphones when watching your shows. Could you knock before entering the living room after 8? At first, I tried to comply. I told myself, they're young, they're stressed. I wiped crumbs twice, folded the towels just so, kept my voice soft. But the walls kept closing in. My name faded from the mailbox. My framed photo vanished from the hallway wall. When Kayla rearranged the furniture one weekend, my armchair ended up in the garage. "We're updating the look," she said cheerfully, as if my chair was just a piece of outdated wallpaper. Todd didn't notice. Or maybe he noticed everything and said nothing. That was always his way. He'd been a quiet boy, full of deep sighs and unasked questions. I used to think he was sensitive. Now I think he just preferred not to deal with anything messy. They never called me a burden, not out loud. But silence has its own dialect. Every unspoken sigh, every eye roll when I asked where the cheese grater had gone, every unfinished sentence that trailed off with, "It's just, you know," spoke volumes. I became smaller by the week. Not physically, though my joints ached more in their too-soft guest bed. No, I shrank where it counts. In presence. In visibility. I was someone whose coffee mugs got moved, whose meals were commented on, whose opinions were tolerated but not welcomed. I was always in the way. At dinner, I'd catch them glancing at one another when I asked about the boys' school. When I tried to help with dishes, Kayla would wave me off with a tight smile. "We've got it." But if I didn't move to help, her mouth would tighten just the same. I was both too much and not enough. One night, I overheard Kayla on the phone. "She's just always there, you know? Like a ghost who folds laundry." I didn't say anything the next day. I just folded the towels tighter. Ghosts, after all, make neat corners. But the moment that truly broke something was simpler than all the rest. It was a Tuesday. I had baked banana bread, the boys' favourite. When they came home, I offered them slices, warm from the oven. One of them smiled shyly. The other reached out eagerly. Todd stepped in and said, "Ask your mum first." Kayla gave a short laugh. "Let's not get into the habit of treats after school. We're watching Sugar." I stood there, holding the plate. They didn't take a slice. Neither did I. That evening, I wrapped the bread in foil and placed it in the freezer. Kayla would throw it out in a week, claiming no one had eaten it, and I would nod. Because that's what I did. I nodded. I smiled. I disappeared. But inside, something had begun to sharpen. Not like a knife, more like memory. I started remembering who I had been before they made me small. A teacher, a gardener, a woman who once ran an entire household with 2 kids and a husband who snored like thunder. I remembered the house I left behind, the way sunlight filtered through the blinds in the kitchen, how the linoleum curled at the corners, the squeaky back door. My door. I still had the keys. And the deed. The house wasn't fancy. It never had been. But it was mine. We bought it in 1978, the year inflation hit hard, and we still managed to scrape together a down payment with grocery store coupons and second-hand furniture. Marvin worked nights at the mill. I taught second grade and cleaned offices on weekends. We didn't travel. We didn't splurge. But we saved. The house sat on a quiet street, 2 blocks from the church and half a mile from the grocery. White clapboard, green shutters, a porch that dipped slightly at one end. We planted a cherry tree the second spring. It never bore fruit, but it bloomed just enough to remind us we'd made something that lasted. It was the kind of place where you tracked mud through the back door and no one yelled, where Christmas lights stayed up till February and no one cared. We hosted potlucks, burned casseroles, held birthday parties with dollar store streamers and hand-painted signs. Every room carried our fingerprints. Marvin died in that house. Pancreatic cancer. Sudden and cruel. He was gone 6 months after diagnosis. I kept his slippers by the bed for 2 years after, like the ghost of comfort might slip them on and come back to me. For a while, I managed alone. The garden was overgrown, but I still pruned the rosebush. The pipes groaned in winter, but I kept the kettle going. Todd would come by on Sundays, mow the lawn, tighten a hinge. Then one day he brought Kayla. Everything changed after that. It wasn't her fault. Not at first. She smiled politely, offered to help clean out the attic. But something in her tone, in the way she touched things like they were already hers, made my spine stiffen. Still, when Todd said, "It'd be good for you to be with us," I listened. I rented the house out, gave the keys to a manager, packed my photo albums and Marvin's toolbox, and moved into their guest room. Now I sat in their house, invisible, and thought about my old front door. The way the hinges creaked like a song only I knew. The little dent near the bottom where Marvin once tripped with a bag of groceries and laughed so hard we both cried. That house had a soul. This one had rules. I reached into my bag and pulled out my old keychain. I hadn't touched it in over a year. The house key was still there, slightly rusted, smooth on the edges. I turned it over in my palm like it might speak. I still owned that house. The deed was in my name. We never put it in a trust. We never added Todd. It was my name on every tax record, every title, every scrap of proof. And though I had left it empty, had let it sit quietly under someone else's management, it had never stopped being mine. I had been so afraid of being alone that I'd forgotten what it meant to have something no one could take from me. I stood up from the guest room bed, walked to the little filing box I kept under the dresser. Inside, between old birthday cards and pension statements, was a manila envelope. I opened it carefully. There it was. Original deed. Notarized. Recorded. My name in neat black ink. Marvin and I had signed it together in 1978 at a folding table in a bank that no longer existed. He'd worn his good flannel shirt. I'd packed us sandwiches. I remembered every detail. The way his hand shook slightly when he passed me the pen. "We'll never be rich," he'd whispered, "but we'll be rooted." I ran my finger over the paper. Rooted. That's what I had been. Until I let myself be repotted in someone else's garden. I had let them cut me back, tell me what kind of light I needed, how often to water. But roots remember, even after drought, even after frost. And mine were still deep in that house. I folded the deed gently, placed it back in the envelope. The next morning, while the house was still asleep, I made my tea, washed the mug, dried it, and tucked it into my bag. I didn't pack anything else. Not yet. Instead, I slipped on my coat, tied my scarf, and stepped out into the cold morning air. I walked down the street, my fingers curled tight in my gloves. And I headed home. The house looked smaller than I remembered, not because it had changed, but because I had. A year of swallowing my voice had shrunk my world, made everything that once fit so naturally feel foreign and delicate. I stood on the sidewalk across the street, watching it like you watch an old friend you're not sure will recognize you. The garden was overrun. The cherry tree leaned a little further to the left. The blinds were closed tight, and a thin film of dust coated the windows. But it was standing. My house. Our house. I crossed the street slowly, pausing at the front gate. The latch stuck a little, just like always. I smiled. Funny how something broken can feel like a welcome. I stepped up onto the porch. My hand found the key before I even looked for it. Muscle memory, like prayer. The lock turned stiffly. The door opened with a groan. I walked in. Silence. Not the kind that screamed loneliness, like in Todd's house. The silence there was cold, sterile. The silence of mouths clamped shut and judgment unspoken. This silence was warmer, fuller. It hummed with memory. It smelled like old wood and something faintly floral, maybe the last breath of a potpourri bowl I left behind. I stood in the foyer for a long time. The furniture was different, neutral, bland. The property manager had done what she was paid to do, made it rentable. But I still saw it all. Marvin's recliner, threadbare in the corners, the quilt I kept on the back of the sofa, the dent in the floorboard where he dropped his toolbox one winter morning and cursed so loud the neighbor knocked. I walked from room to room, trailing my hand along the walls. In the kitchen, I opened the drawers, emptied of personality. No sticky tape, no mismatched measuring cups, no coupons shoved into the back with rubber bands. Just smooth emptiness. Waiting. The bedroom still held a faint echo of lavender. I had placed satchels in the closets to keep the air sweet. One had crumbled to dust in the corner. The mattress was firm, untouched. No one had slept in this room in months, maybe longer. I sat on the edge of the bed. It didn't creak. I closed my eyes and saw Marvin brushing his teeth in the mirror, humming something off-key. I saw myself in the corner chair, darning socks. Not because we had to, but because we were the kind of people who didn't throw things away just because they were worn. I opened the closet and ran my fingers over the empty hangers. And that's when the idea came. Not loud, not sudden. It arrived like everything real does. Slowly, steadily, with a kind of quiet certainty that doesn't ask for permission. Todd didn't think I needed a room, so I would give him one, a storage room. The next day, I called the property manager, told her I wouldn't be renting anymore. She didn't ask why, just sent the final paperwork. Then I called a locksmith, changed the locks, bought new blinds, scrubbed the kitchen tile with lemon and vinegar until my knees ached and my hands went stiff. And then I walked into the room that used to be Todd's. The posters were gone, of course, the beanbag chair, the scuff marks near the baseboards where he once kicked his shoes off too hard. But the shape of him was still there, the outline of a life raised in that space. A boy who dreamed loudly and laughed with his whole body. A boy who once cried when he broke a snow globe because it had been our thing. That boy was gone. In his place was a man who told his mother she didn't need a room. I boxed up the things in the closet, old books, a few blankets. Then I measured the walls, called the handyman, installed shelving, bought bins. I labelled each one with neat handwriting. Seasonal, kitchen overflow, tools, paint supplies. The bed went to the basement. The closet became a filing nook. The dresser, emptied and wiped down, held gardening gloves and seed packets. By the end of the week, the room was unrecognizable, not in spite, not in anger, in reclamation. The boy who grew up in that room had forgotten the woman who built it for him, and the woman who built it had finally remembered herself. I didn't tell anyone I had left, not Todd, not Kayla, not the boys. I didn't leave a note on the fridge, didn't pack boxes under watchful eyes, didn't say goodbye. When they took their weekend trip, "Just a little getaway, Mum. The kids need a change of scenery." I waited for their taillights to disappear, then walked to the bus station with one bag and a quiet mind. They thought I was touring nursing homes. In a way, I was, just not for myself. The house welcomed me back, like an old coat you forgot still fit. It didn't ask where I'd been. It didn't care that my hair was greyer, my joints slower. It opened its door like it had been waiting. By Monday, I was settled. By Wednesday, I had plans. I called Ruth, a realtor I'd known from church luncheons years back. Her voice cracked with surprise. "Geraldine? My goodness, I thought you'd moved out of town." "Just moved out of patience," I replied. "I need someone who can handle an unrented house with discretion." She chuckled. "You know I'm good for that." I told her the details. No open houses? No signs on the lawn? No photos showing personal spaces? And no discussions with my family. "Is it in your name?" she asked. I didn't even hesitate. It's always been. That evening, I walked through the rooms again, not with nostalgia, but with inventory. What could stay? What needed to go? I opened every drawer. I wiped every shelf. I moved like a woman preparing for something real, not just a sale, a shift. Then I opened the envelope again. The deed sat quietly inside, still crisp, like it had been waiting for this moment. I made a copy and slid it into a folder labeled My Name, My House. Later that night, I brewed a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the moon rise over the cherry tree. It hadn't bloomed in years, but I still believed it might. I remembered the way Marvin used to talk to it. "Come on, girl," he'd whisper, rubbing the bark. "Give us something for all that water." Maybe he was talking to me now. By Friday, Ruth had a few interested parties. The market was hot. She whispered over the phone like we were plotting something illegal. "You'll have offers by Monday, Geraldine. Cash, even. Make sure they know it's occupied until I say otherwise." "You mean?" "I'm not moving out. I'm moving around." I could almost hear her smile. I spent Saturday boxing up the last of Todd's things. I didn't throw anything out. Just packed it neat, labelled each box, and stacked them in the garage. I didn't even tape them shut. Let him come get them. Or don't. The next morning, I received a message from Kayla, a group text. "Mum, we're heading home tomorrow. Let us know how the facility tour goes. Hope you liked the one on Lexington. The boys miss you." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then powered the phone off. No reply. No argument. Just off. Instead, I walked out to the garden with a spade in hand, knelt down, and began to dig. Not a grave. A new beginning. Mint, rosemary, lavender. The herbs went in clean rows. My knees complained, but I told them to hush. They'd carried heavier things. By the time the sun began to dip, my fingers were dark with soil, and something in my chest felt lighter. They were coming home tomorrow, but I wouldn't be there, because this was home. And I had remembered. They came home to silence. No note on the table. No stew simmering on the stove. No slippers by the door. Just quiet and a house that felt different. Lighter, maybe. Emptier, certainly. I imagined Kayla walking through each room, eyes narrowing at the absence, at the blinds drawn tighter, at the subtle rearrangements, the scent of lemon oil in the air, the door to Todd's old room now labelled storage, the boys asking, "Where's Grandma?" And Todd, fumbling for answers he didn't have. They didn't call that first night, or the next. But I knew they would. On Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed. I let it ring, watched the name on the screen like it was a headline I'd already read. Todd, mobile. Then Kayla. Then unknown number. I imagined her borrowing a co-worker's phone, thinking I'd blocked her. I hadn't. I just didn't want to answer. I sat on the back porch with a glass of iced tea and watched the wind nudge the garden. The mint had taken well. The rosemary stood tall. Everything in the soil knew its place. Let them wonder. Let them circle. That evening, Ruth called. "Geraldine," she said, low and calm, "you've got 3 offers." I didn't blink. "Rental?" "2 are. 1 is a lease to own." "Show me the terms." She emailed them within the hour. I read every line, highlighted, annotated. Marvin would have been proud. I chose the family from Vermont. Small business owners, neat references, no pets. The lease started in 30 days. That gave me time. Time to move forward. Not out of the house. Not yet. Just forward. I went through my belongings with calm precision, not hoarding, not rushing, just choosing what mattered. My books. My wedding china. The quilt I made the year Marvin got laid off, pieced together from shirts too worn to wear. The rest I boxed. Some for donation, some for sale. Nothing with bitterness. I didn't feel bitter anymore. I felt awake. The next day, Todd finally called again. This time he left a message. "Hey, Mum. We're back. The boys were confused, I guess. I guess we thought you'd still be here. Kayla said maybe you're just taking some space, but I don't know. Call me?" His voice cracked a little near the end. Not with grief, with discomfort. The kind that comes when someone realizes they've misread the entire story. I didn't call back. Instead, I took the rental contract to the notary, signed it, initialed every clause, mailed the copy to Ruth with a check for her fee. That evening, I sat in the old armchair, Marvin's chair, and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Hi, this is Beverly," the voice chirped on the line. "Bev," I said, "it's Geraldine. You still renting that little studio by the water?" She gasped. "Geraldine Brooks? Lord have mercy, I thought you'd joined a commune or something." "Yes, I've got a spot. It's small but clean." "I'll take it, month to month." "Done?" And just like that, I had a place. Quiet, modest, mine. Not a mansion, not a nursing home. A choice. That night, I made a list. Redirect mail. Transfer pension deposits. Cancel Kayla's streaming service. I'd been paying for it. Imagine that. Pack what mattered. I did it all with a steady hand. Todd had said I didn't need a room. I took that to heart and gave myself a life. The key turned with ease. That's what surprised me most. I had expected resistance, a stuck lock, a creaky hinge, something symbolic. But no. The door opened as if it had been waiting. Beverly met me with a grin and a mug of tea. "Place still smells like ocean and paint," she warned, stepping aside. It was perfect. One room, a kitchenette, and a narrow balcony that overlooked a sliver of sea if you leaned just right. The walls were pale blue, the floors scuffed but clean. There was a faint smell of eucalyptus and salt, the kind of scent that doesn't beg to be noticed, but lingers like a memory. "I'll give you privacy," Beverly said, handing me the keys. "You've got good bones, Geraldine. You'll settle in." Good bones. I smiled at the phrase. Marvin used to say that about houses, about people, about cars that rattled but still ran. It meant something could be saved, made useful again. I stood alone in that studio for a long while, my suitcase by the door, coat still on. Then I walked to the balcony, slid the door open, and stepped into the wind. It was brisk, a little sharp, the kind that bites your cheeks and clears your thoughts. I breathed in deep. For the first time in years, I didn't smell someone else's dinner burning in the next room. Didn't hear TV laughter I wasn't invited to join. Didn't feel the air tighten around me like I was taking up space someone else needed. I was alone. But I wasn't lonely. That evening, I unpacked slowly. Not everything. Just the essentials. A photo of Marvin, one of the boys as toddlers, my good kettle. I filled the small bookshelf with titles I'd meant to reread for years, but never had the quiet for. I made soup. From scratch. Ate it with crackers and silence. Not TV silence, not ignored silence. Chosen silence. After dinner, I sat by the window and watched the streetlights flicker on. Across the way, someone played piano, badly, and still, it made my heart ache. Not with sadness, with relief. This was what I had wanted all along. Not grandeur, just a place where I could be, without asking. Back at the house, I imagined Kayla peeking into the storage room and finding it neat, labelled, functional. No trace of Todd. No room for negotiation. I wondered if she would call it petty. I didn't care. Let her think what she wants. By the weekend, the lease was finalised. The Vermont couple would move in next month. I left instructions with Ruth. No forwarding address. Rent payments direct deposit only. No phone calls unless legal. She didn't argue. I spent the next days settling into my new rhythm. Mornings with tea and the news, walks along the pier, grocery runs that fit in one tote, books read, cover to cover without interruption. I began writing letters I'd never send. To Marvin, mostly. I told him about the mint, the ocean air, the piano across the street. About how I'd forgotten what it felt like to be alone without being invisible. And I started something else, too. A small notebook, plain cover. On the first page I wrote, January 17th. Todd said I didn't need a room, so I built a life instead. The first letter came on a Thursday. A crisp white envelope, my name written in Todd's handwriting, still slightly slanted, still oddly neat for a boy who once spilled cereal every morning of second grade. There was no return address, just the house's zip code. I didn't open it, not out of spite, out of clarity. Whatever he had to say now, he could have said then. I placed the envelope in the kitchen drawer beside my spoons and forgot about it. The next day, the phone rang. Unknown number. Then again, this time a voicemail. Mum, please pick up. We just want to talk. We're confused. The storage room? What's going on? Are you okay? Just call back, please. I deleted it. By Monday, Ruth called again. They tried to contact the management company, she said calmly, claiming you'd moved without notice. And? I reminded them the property isn't in their name, that the tenant contract has been filed, that you, and only you, are the legal owner. And how did that sit with them? Ruth let out a breath. About as well as you'd expect. We laughed. Not out of cruelty, out of recognition. Later that afternoon, I received a text from Kayla. Geraldine, I think you're acting irrationally. The boys are asking for you. We're your family. You can't just disappear. Can't I? The idea that silence was irrational amused me. They had thrived on my silence, used it like wallpaper, always there, never asking for anything. But now that it stood between us with purpose, it suddenly felt like rebellion. I poured myself a cup of mint tea, sat on the balcony, and wrote in my notebook. February 3rd. Silence is not the absence of love, it's the presence of boundaries. The calls slowed after that. The texts became less frequent. A kind of uneasy quiet settled, like the air before a storm or after a funeral. Then, one morning, Beverly knocked on my door holding a manila envelope. Looks like official mail, she said. County seal. I opened it slowly. Inside, confirmation of ownership record transfer, lease registration, tax documents. Ruth had handled it all. Every form bore my name, my signature, my authority, and tucked in the back was a single sheet. A copy of a letter Todd had written to the county office, attempting to dispute the lease, claiming familial confusion. The response was stamped in bold. Claim rejected. Property title sole owner, Geraldine Brooks. Lease executed with full legal authority. I read it once, folded it neatly. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. That night, I lit a candle for Marvin, not because I believed in ghosts, but because I needed to speak to someone who once held my shaking hand and made me feel unshakable. I remembered who I am, I whispered. You'd be proud of me, I think. The flame danced gently in reply. The next day, I bought a small tin mailbox from the hardware store, painted it green, screwed it into the wall beside my door. On the side, I labeled it, Miss G. Brooks, no deliveries without grace. I didn't hear from them for a month, not a call, not a text, not a letter. The silence should have felt like peace, but some silences hum under the skin like an unanswered question. Then, out of nowhere, came a knock. It was a Tuesday morning. I had just sat down with my second cup of tea, the air thick with the scent of lemon balm and the soft ticking of the wall clock. The kind of quiet you earn, not stumble into. I opened the door to see a courier. "Miss Brooks?" he asked. I nodded. "Legal delivery. Please sign here." He handed me a clipboard and a sealed envelope. I signed. He tipped his cap and left. Inside was a letter from a law office, not Ruth's, not mine, Kayla's, or rather her cousin's firm. The language was firm, not cruel. Formal concern about ownership confusion. A request for review and dialogue, phrased carefully to imply I'd made a mistake. Like perhaps in my age and grief, I'd misunderstood my rights. Like I was fragile. I wasn't. I made a pot of tea, pulled out the folder where I kept everything, deed, lease, notarized statements, and scanned it all into a USB drive. Then I walked 2 blocks to the post office and mailed it overnight to Ruth with a note. "If they want to dance, make sure we lead." By the next week, it was over. Ruth forwarded me the response her office sent. Polite, bulletproof, final. "Miss Brooks has acted within full legal authority and remains the sole title holder of the property in question. No further correspondence will be acknowledged unless routed through official legal mediation." They didn't try again. But something in me had shifted. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about the tone, the assumption, the quiet condescension that came laced in legalese and family dinners alike. The belief that because I didn't shout, I must not know how to stand. That weekend, I opened the last of the boxes I had left sealed. Todd's things. I had meant to keep them for a while, just in case. But what case exactly? The case where he remembered I was human? The case where he apologized? I unwrapped a stack of childhood drawings, stick figures with oversized smiles. One showed me in a cape, labeled Mom. I didn't cry. I just folded it carefully and slid it into a file labeled Then. The rest I packed tighter, sealed with fresh tape, and printed a label. To be picked up by appointment only. Contents not sentimental. Just forgotten. I left the box in the house garage with a note for Ruth's assistant. Later that evening, Beverly knocked again, this time with soup. "Made too much," she said. "You okay? You look like someone who just got rid of a ghost." I smiled. "Just packing up history." She leaned against the doorframe. "That can be heavier than furniture." We sat on my balcony and ate soup with plastic spoons. At one point, she asked gently, "You ever think they'll come around?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I don't need them to come around. I just need them to stop circling me like I'm lost." That night, I added another line to my notebook. March 12th. Being underestimated is exhausting, but being free, that's just quiet joy. I visited the house one last time before the new tenants moved in. It wasn't for nostalgia. It was for order, for finality. Closure, maybe, though I don't much care for that word. It sounds too much like a polite funeral. The keys still sat heavy in my coat pocket, warm from the walk. I stood on the porch for a long moment before I unlocked the door. The air inside was still, a little stale, but not unfriendly. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in stripes, laying quiet patterns across the wood floor, like memory trying to make itself visible. I moved from room to room, not touching much, just looking. The furniture was plain, neutral, part of the rental staging. The kind that suggests comfort, but doesn't quite earn it. Still, it was enough. In the kitchen, I paused by the sink. Marvin had fixed that faucet 3 times before finally replacing it. I remember how proud he was that day, wiping his hands on a dish towel, saying, "Now it won't scream at you every morning?" I smiled at the memory. That faucet had screamed louder than any child we ever raised. The herb pots I had planted were thriving out back. The mint had spread its roots, bold and unapologetic. The rosemary was stubborn, standing tall despite the wind. I brushed a leaf between my fingers and let the scent rise. The storage room, Todd's old bedroom, was still tidy, shelves labelled, everything in its place. No bed, no posters, just purpose. I didn't feel cruel. I felt precise. I left a note for the new tenants on the kitchen counter. "Welcome. May this house give you what it once gave me: quiet, shelter, and a place to grow something of your own. G. Brooks." Then I turned off the lights, locked the door behind me, and slipped the key into Ruth's Dropbox at the agency. By the time I returned to my little studio, a lightness had settled in my chest. Not happiness, exactly. Something sturdier. Like when you've been carrying a heavy bag for so long, you forget how it feels to stand upright. And then one day, you do. I spent the evening rearranging my bookshelf. I found a photo I hadn't seen in years. Me and Marvin in front of the cherry tree, holding gardening gloves and grinning like fools. I placed it beside the window. The next morning, I called the power company and changed the billing address. Called the bank, the insurance, the city's utility office. Each time they asked, "Are you the homeowner?" "Yes," I said. "I am." It felt good every time. That afternoon, I took myself out to lunch. Nothing fancy. Just a corner cafe with worn menus and honest soup. I sat by the window watching people pass, young women in scrubs, old men with dogs, teenagers on scooters. I belonged to none of their worlds. And that was fine. I had a new one now. As I paid the bill, the waitress handed me a fortune cookie, one of those paper-thin clichés in plastic wrap. I almost tossed it, but something in me wanted the theatre of it. I cracked it open. The slip read, "You already have what you need." I laughed, right there at the table. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote, April 4th. Today, I returned the last key. It didn't feel like letting go. It felt like arriving. I didn't expect to feel so calm, not at this stage in life, not after everything. But there I was, sitting on a sun-warmed bench by the shoreline, sandwich in one hand, paperback in the other, no deadlines, no sideways glances, no one needing anything from me except presence. And for the first time in years, even I wasn't asking for more than that. My studio had settled around me like a cardigan I'd forgotten I owned. Every item in its place, every creak familiar. I learned which drawer stuck, which floorboard complained, which time of day brought the best sunlight into my reading chair. Even the dust seemed to fall in patterns I didn't mind. Money wasn't abundant, but the rent from the house covered more than I needed. I opened a new account in my name only. I ordered checks with just G. Brooks printed across the top, and when the bank teller asked if I wanted to add a family member to the account, I answered without hesitation. No, just me. I took to walking in the mornings, not far, just to the corner grocer or down to the docks, where old fishermen drank burnt coffee and nodded without needing to speak. I liked that. The absence of performance. The quiet solidarity of people who had long since given up trying to be impressive. I met a few neighbours. Eleanor in 2B had a cat named Harold, who hated everyone but me. Gus in 4A offered me tomatoes from his balcony garden, and I taught him how to make proper biscuits. There were no birthday parties, no gatherings, just small gestures that said, "You exist. I see you." It was enough. I started journaling again. Not every day, but often. I wrote about the boys when they were young, about Marvin's laugh, about the blue dress I used to wear when I wanted to feel unstoppable. I wrote about the house, the moment it stopped being home, and the sharper moment it became mine again. I didn't write about Todd and Kayla much. Some absences don't need filling. Sometimes, when the breeze came just right through the open window, I'd brew a pot of mint tea, open my notebook, and write a single line. You survived it, Geraldine. You survived them forgetting who you were. One Saturday, I passed a small bookstore tucked between a laundromat and a closed bakery. The sign read, "We sell the words you forgot you needed." I stepped inside. The owner was in her 30s, dreadlocks tied back, glasses perched low on her nose. She greeted me with a nod. Not too warm, not distant, just right. I spent an hour browsing, left with 2 books and a feeling I hadn't had in years, that there was still more to be said, more to be read, more to be lived. That night, I opened the window wide and sat cross-legged on my bed. I took out my notebook and wrote, May 6th, I am not rebuilding. I am building for the first time without apology. Then I turned off the light and slept soundly. The call came just after midnight, not a polite time, not a time you forget. I was already half awake, the kind of sleep that's light as tissue. Years of listening for babies crying, husbands coughing, houses settling into silence. It was Todd. I didn't pick up. Then a voicemail. Mom, I know it's late. I wouldn't call if it weren't. I need to talk to you. Things aren't good. Kayla and I, she's gone. She took the boys and left. I didn't even see it coming. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. He paused. I could hear his breathing. Uneven, sharp. I messed up. I should have said something back then. I should have stopped her. You didn't deserve any of it. I know that now. I was just trying to, I don't know, keep the peace, I guess, be neutral. But I see it now. I see everything. And I'm sorry. I really am. Another pause. Can you call me back, please? I listened to the message twice. Then I deleted it. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. You see, there's a strange thing that happens when someone who minimized you suddenly remembers you existed. They panic. They think your forgiveness is a door that never locks. But I had changed the locks. I sat for a long time on the edge of my bed, the phone heavy in my hand. I thought of his tiny fingers wrapped around mine in the hospital, of the time he brought me dandelions from the yard and called them Mommy's flowers, of the boy he used to be. But I also remembered the way he looked away when Kayla called me dead weight, the way he said nursing home like it was kindness. Some things you don't unhear. By morning, he had called 4 more times, left 1 more voicemail, less raw, more desperate. I just need somewhere to stay, just for a bit, till I figure things out. Please. I won't be a problem. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the balcony, watched a bird try to balance on the railing, then flap off when the wind shifted. Then I opened my notebook and wrote, June the 2nd. They always remember you when they're falling, not when they were pushing. That afternoon, I walked to the bookstore. The same girl was there, rearranging a display of poetry books. Got anything on Grace? I asked. She smiled and pulled a slim volume from a lower shelf. This one doesn't use the word, she said, but it shows you what it looks like. I bought it, tucked it into my tote, took the long way home. At dinner, I lit a candle and set a second plate across from mine. Not for Todd, for the woman I used to be. She deserved to be seen too. He came in person 3 days later. No warning, no call, just a knock. Soft, unsure. The kind you use when you're not certain the door should open. I knew it was him before I looked. Some instincts don't dull. I opened the curtain just enough to see his silhouette. Shoulders slumped, jacket too thin for the weather, a duffel bag at his feet. He looked older than he was. Not by years, but by choices. I didn't open the door. Instead, I pressed the intercom. "Todd?" He looked up, startled by the sound of my voice. Not warm, not cruel, just even. "Mom," he breathed. "Thank God. Can we talk?" I said nothing. He shifted, cleared his throat. "I've got nowhere to go. I've been sleeping in my car. Kayla won't answer. I'm not asking for forever. Just a few nights. Just until I can breathe again." Still, I said nothing. He pressed on. "I know I was wrong. I didn't stop her. I didn't stop myself. I thought I was being neutral. But now I know there's no such thing as neutral when someone's hurting your mother in your own house." His voice cracked. "You deserved better. You always did." I stepped closer to the speaker. "You didn't lose me when you ignored the first insult," I said. "Or the second. You lost me when you made me feel like I had to earn air in a house I paid for." He nodded slowly. "I know." "And now you want what? Shelter? Kindness? A corner?" "No," he said softly. "I just want a second chance to be decent." I looked at him, really looked. Not the boy I raised. Not the man who sat silent at that dinner table. But something in between. Someone tired. Someone maybe trying. But I also saw something else. Myself. And I remembered all the nights I stayed quiet, just to keep things calm. All the dinners I served with hands that trembled, but a smile that never did. All the times I folded towels with precision, not because anyone cared, but because it was the last dignity they hadn't taken from me. "I don't hate you," I said. His eyes welled. "But I can't save you." He stepped back, as if the truth itself pushed him. "This place is mine," I added, "not because I own the walls, but because I earned every inch of this peace." He nodded, not in agreement, in understanding. "I'm not shutting the door to punish you," I said. "I'm just finally keeping it closed for me." He didn't argue. He picked up his bag. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For answering at all." I watched him walk down the street, not fast, not angry, just quietly, like someone who finally heard a sentence they'd been dodging for years. That night, I wrote in my notebook, July 15th, "Forgiveness isn't a door, it's a boundary." The days grew quieter after that. Not the lonely kind of quiet. The kind you notice between waves or in the pause before a kettle sings. A quiet that doesn't ache anymore. I settled into my life like a well-worn coat. Tea at dawn, walks before noon. A book always half read, a cardigan always halfway draped across a chair. I didn't count days, just pages. I stopped watching the clock. It had nothing left to take from me. The studio became more than enough. I planted herbs on the sill, hung wind chimes made from old keys and spoons, filled the shelves with library books and memories I chose to keep. Sometimes Beverly would knock with leftover soup. Sometimes Gus would holler across the hall to ask if I'd tasted his tomatoes yet. I always had. The old life faded, not erased, just filed where it belonged. In the drawer labelled "Before." Once I passed a mother and son on the street. She was holding his elbow as they crossed, but he didn't notice. He was on his phone, laughing with someone else. Her eyes scanned the sidewalk like she was trying to remember where she'd last seen her name. I wanted to stop and tell her, "Don't wait to disappear before remembering you exist." But I didn't. Some things we have to learn the hard way. One evening, I lit a candle and sat with my notebook. The same one that had held every word I didn't get to say when they called me too quiet. I flipped through pages filled with sharp truths and soft victories, and on the last page, I wrote, "You can survive silence. You can survive being ignored, erased, repurposed into usefulness. But you must not survive without remembering who you were before they made you small." Then I set the pen down, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. If this story touched something inside you, if you've ever folded towels while someone sighed, or brewed tea in a house that forgot you, then let me say this: you are not the problem. You are the proof. And if you've ever needed a voice when yours was too tired to rise, then let mine be yours for now. Subscribe to Grandma's Untold Stories, because here we don't raise our voices. We raise the truth, quietly, clearly, and forever.